ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Japanese 101. This is actually lesson 17 now. I know that because I just checked and the last one was 16. And today we're going to talk about conditionals. So first of all, conditionals are basically like if sentences, okay? Sentences. All right, if sentences. I hope my handwriting isn't too bad. That's what conditionals are. That's also where we get the word from. A condition. It means something that needs to be met so that something else can happen. Think simple if sentences in English. If you tell me, I'll know it. If you love me, say it out loud. Something like that, right? So those are conditional sentence. It's from the word condition. It means that thing A, right, must be met. Like if thing A, then it can lead to thing B. So basically, if this condition is checked, then this condition can, or this result can be met. And as such, any sentence that is a conditional sentence will be of said structure. You have a condition, okay? A condition. We'll shorten this to cond, okay? You have a condition, and that will lead into a result or a consequence. We'll call it like consequence, okay? Consequence or result, whichever. Sometimes these may be kind of flipped in a way where you might mention the consequence first and then the condition, but it will still like sort of the meaning of them is still like the same. Naka inside them. Not really, not that I know of. So you'll see which ones that exist basically. And in Japanese, there's many different ways of making a conditional sentence, as there is in English, by the way. In English you have different conditionals as well, and we'll mention some of them. And so you do in Japanese and in any language. Conditionals are pretty important because we give conditions all the time. Again, with what I said earlier. Like, if I leave now, I can still make it to the train station in time. That's a conditional sentence because I'm saying if, right? Because I'm giving a condition and the result. Because if I leave now is the condition and the result is I can make it in time. You know, about conditionals before. We will talk about conditionals today. So there's 3 big conditionals. Let me just quickly think. 4. There's 4 big conditionals that we will actually talk about today. So let's start with the first one. Hey Wesef, how are you doing? We will start actually with the strongest conditional, and what I mean with strong is hopefully going to be clear in a second. We will start with number 1, which would be the to conditional. I'll make this red. So we'll talk about the to conditional. What is the to conditional? Basically, you use the particle to make a conditional phrase. Let's first talk about the structure, okay? How to actually express a condition with using to. And the structure is as follows. It's fairly simple. It's basically you have 2 versions. You have one would be something like this. It would be a condition plus to plus result. Okay, that's kind of what it is. Condition plus to plus result. Now this will usually be a clause, and this will usually be a clause. Not always, but most of the time this should be a clause. I've explained in the past what clauses are. Basically just like, you know, it's like a subunit of a sentence. The smallest sentence is one clause, basically. It just has to contain a predicate. If you don't know what a clause is, I encourage you to look at some of the other episodes. We've talked about it a lot. Or Google it. It's really not that hard. But yeah, you usually have a conditional clause, then you have the conditional particle, and then you have the resulting clause. Okay? And the second version that you could have would look something like this. It's like a state of being. State of being, and then you will usually then have plus dato, okay? Dato plus result. I'm gonna shorten it to res. Now, what does this state of being are? These can be like nouns, for example, like cats, right? And you see already with the da particle, the copula, it sort of relates back to these state of being sentences. For example, I can say I'm a student. And that's a state of being. I can just use the noun student, and I can say, 学生だ. I'm a student. I'm a university student. Could just be like, 大学生だ. I'm a university student. That's itself also a clause because it has the copula, which here acts as the predicate. So the state of being here is just the noun 学生 and then we use the copula da to just make it this sort of state of being clause. We're just expressing a matter of fact. We're just expressing a state, so to speak. If you know how to use the da copula, then you already know what this is, this state of being stuff. And I have talked about that in the past too, so there you go. If you don't know that, you can look it up. That's the second version. So these are like basically the two ways in which we use the to conditional. Okay, now the easiest way to now understand the rest of it is we're just going to look at examples. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this. But remember this, it's always like condition, the conditional particle, and then it's result. So yeah, so let's look at some examples, and then I'll also explain like the specific nuance that the to conditional has, which will then become clear as we look at the other conditionals. It should hopefully become clear how it's different from the others and how they each can be differentiated. Hey, Jinx, thank you for the follow. Arigatou gozaimasu. So to speed this up, I'm actually just going to copy these. Today I'm using Taekim's article as guidance a little bit. There's other articles that you can find, but for today we're going to use that because I'm already kind of used to it. I've used it a bunch in the past, and it's a pretty good article all over. So that's what we're going to use. Let me just select the right font here. You need to be white. Plop. And for a font, we will use, we'll just use Maru Kosugi. Wait, which one was it again? Yeah. Why is it so slow? There. There, this one. I like this font. It's a good font. All right, there we go. We have our sentence. All right, so. Boru o otosu to ochiru. So this is kind of like a pleonastic sentence, and if you know what that means, it means they're basically saying the same thing twice or multiple times. But it's fine. It works really well for our purposes. This here, I'm just gonna add little furigana here, so that's a bit easier. Otos, and I'm gonna do Genki style furigana under the word here. Write that again. Otosu to ochiru. Okay. Ochiru. Okay. Otosu to ochiru. Boru just means a ball. Hey Mochi, how are you doing? Boru o otosu to ochiru. So let's package this up so that it has the same structure as it did before. Basically we have condition, to, and result. Okay, that's all we have. So now it's the same shape as it was before. And we can look at these parts, these clauses, by themselves. That's usually the interesting part in understanding what a clause is that you can isolate it and investigate its meaning in isolation from the rest of the sentence. Now, sometimes you still have to know the rest of the sentence for it to make sense, but it is an interesting tool is to break stuff down into these clauses to sort of understand each individual part, and then at the end to just put it back together. So here, it is very helpful for us to do that. So here, this clause just says, boru o otosu. That just says, drop a ball, right? Drop ball. And that's just what otosu means. Otosu is transitive, it means to drop something. Boru o otosu, just drop a ball. And this here is also a clause. It's very short, it's just one verb, but it's still a clause, and it just means, you know, it'll fall. Here we can interpret it as a future tense because non-past in Japanese, like here ochiru, can often indicate sort of a future action, something that hasn't happened yet. So we'll just say it'll fall. And we're using it here because we don't have a specified subject, but it makes sense that it would relate back to the ball that was mentioned over here. So what does this mean? It's fairly simple, right? This to is a conditional, and like I said, conditional are like if sentences. So basically, it's really simple. It's just if you drop a ball, it falls. I purposefully use what I think in English this is called the zero conditional, where you use present tense and then present tense again or something. If drop a ball, it falls, instead of it will fall. This is like, generally, I think in English, if you phrase it like this, it's the strongest version of phrasing a condition. It's something that will always happen. It's often sometimes called the natural consequence kind of conditional. And to in Japanese works a lot like that. where to is a very strong conditional. It's used to basically express like common sense, natural consequence type of stuff, where it's like, well, if you do that, that other thing will always happen, you know? This is not like, ボールを落とすと落ちる is not sort of a phrase where like, when you drop a ball, sometimes it may fall. It's like, it will always fall, usually, as long as there's gravity, you know? If you kill a person, they die. Yeah, you can make the same sentence as well with a kill a person, which we might actually, now that you've mentioned it, we might as well, even though it's a bit of a morbid sentence. So that's what the to conditional is. It's like the natural consequence kind of conditional, okay? So when you have condition plus to plus result, it's kind of like, yeah, that's always the expected result. ボールを落とすと落ちる. If you drop a ball, it falls, okay? So that's what the to conditional indicates. All right, like it's a natural consequence type of condition. Now let's look at that sentence that Aesu mentioned as well. If you kill a person, they die. We can actually phrase that the exact same way using the to conditional, which is just like 人. You would just phrase it like 人を殺すと死ぬ. It's very simple. 人を殺すと死ぬ. If you kill a person, they die. You know, that's it. 人を殺すと死ぬ. And you can see how simple it is too. Killing people. No, you can see how simple this grammar point really is. Because we don't really have to think all that much. We just have to know that we need two clauses. I'll make this red again. We just have to know that we need two clauses, a condition and a result. And that's it. And you can make these parts longer as well. But the basic structure always works like that, where you have condition, to, result, okay? It's always kind of how it works. And this pattern will repeat itself over the whole lesson that we're going to do today. You're going to see this over and over. So yeah, that's the to conditional. Let's make an example that what I mentioned earlier with the state of being, right? So that we can use dato. This is also not all that hard. All we have to do is find a sentence that will use a clause that will use da, the copula. Earlier I mentioned 学生だ, which is like I'm a student, right? Let's use that. We can say something like 学生だと. And again, we have the to here. 学生だと勉強しないといけない. And we have another. So there's actually two to conditionals in here. And it's a bit sneaky because the second one is almost more of a set phrase. The verbs need to be in sentence ending or can they be conjugated? These verbs here need to be in a sentence ending tense. You can't use something like te form. They need to be some sort of sentence ending form. Yes, like like 数詞形, like the non-past, past tense. Well, actually, it needs to be non-past. It can't be past tense. You wouldn't use past tense usually because you're saying like a condition. So if it's, yeah, you wouldn't use past tense, I'm pretty sure. 殺したと, yeah, you wouldn't use past tense. It would have to be non-past. Or something like present continuous, like ている can also work. 話していると, that works. You can do that. Differentiate と and something like, yeah, so you can differentiate that. Let's quickly look at this example first, and then I'll tell you how you differentiate those two, Taco. So here, 学生だと勉強しないといけない. We actually have two と conditionals in here. But this one here, ないといけない is almost like a set phrase, though it is really just a conditional. It means if you don't, that's not good, and it just means you must, okay? We'll talk about this at a later point. For now, think of this one here, 勉強しないといけない. Think of it as you must study, okay? So we have two clauses again. And yeah, that's basically it. We have a condition, 学生だ. You're a student. と, if you are a student, 勉強しないといけない. You have to study. If you are a student, you have to study. Does that make sense? Again, kind of don't worry too much about this ないといけない part. We'll talk about it at a later point, but it's actually fairly straightforward. It's the same structure again, which is 勉強しない, not study. と, if you don't study. いけない, it won't go. So this is the Japanese way of phrasing a must. A need to do something is by emphasizing that not doing it would be bad. That's just a Japanese way of phrasing a must structure. So yeah, that's the other way of using the to with a state of being, だと, and then the result. Double negatives, yeah, basically. Now, how do you differentiate this to from the other to? It's actually fairly simple. If you have clause, to clause, it's always like a conditional, okay? This would be conditional. If you have noun, to, noun, there it's an and, it's a grouper, and grouping. Okay, does that make sense? If it's between clauses, it's basically always a conditional particle. If it's between nouns, it's always an and or a grouping particle. Okay, I hope that works, or I hope that helps you out here. Sometimes here, this noun is obviously not always needed, so like 友達と勉強する, there would just be like with a friend, but then 友達 is still a noun. So that would still be this case. And if it's だと or verb と, then it's basically always a conditional. All right, so that's the to conditional. Let's look at another conditional. Again, like I said, we're going to look at about 4 today. There we go. I'm just gonna do it like this, where I will just get rid of this guy first. And the next one that we're gonna look at is contextual. Okay, so the next one will be Nara. Okay, we're gonna look at the Nara conditional. Nara is, again, by the way, these can all be considered particles. Both to, even as a conditional particle, will be considered a particle, and Nara will also kind of be considered a particle in the way it is discussed or used. So here we have the Nara conditional. I'm just gonna get rid of this sentence real quick. Boop. All right, now we have some space. Now, the Nara conditional is pretty similar in the way it's formed. It's just a little bit more of like a traditional if, okay? It kind of works with, instead of having like a straight up condition, it's more like an assumed sort of condition. It's like an assumed context. So we can call it that. That will work fine for our purposes. So basically you have like, I will make this white. You have like an assumed context here. And then you have Nara, which I'll make red, plus Nara. And then you have the result, basically. So what that means, it's a little bit more like an if, right? It's a little bit more like, oh yeah, if that happens, then something else might happen. It's not quite as strong. It's kind of more like the traditional if in English. For example, if I, maybe we can find examples that work here. Yeah, for example, if everyone is going, I'll go too. And it's like the traditional, in English, you would phrase it as if plus condition plus future tense with the I will go. If you're going, I will go too. And that's that if plus future tense English structure that works really well with this sort of Nara conditional. So if this assumed context and then the result that would follow if that was the case, right? If that makes sense. Kattara. How about kattara? Yeah, so kattara is exactly that. If I win, ureshi. If I win, I'll be happy. And then that's really saying like, only if I win. I'm not saying that guaranteed that I win, but I'm saying like, well, if I were to win, that'd be good. Something like that, right? So one thing to keep in mind is that you cannot attach nara to state of being sort of copula phrases, okay? That would be a big no-no. Anything that is ... like da cannot be combined with nara, okay? So this is a big no-no here. No da plus nara, all right? So this is no good. Actually, a way of getting around that would be dearu nara or deareba, but for now, don't worry too much about it. Just remember, don't combine nara with da. Kaeru nara, yeah. For example, if it can be changed, if I change, something like that. Kaeru nara. Hey, thanks for the follow. Daijoubu toast. I appreciate that. Follow arigato. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't combine nara with da. Specifically, the copula da shouldn't be combined with nara. As well as this. By the way, this also goes for the to conditional. You never say this to, because generally when it's not the end of a sentence, saying this isn't that appropriate. You would use da instead if it's not the end of the sentence. Even if you're speaking politely, you wouldn't use this there in the middle, right? To go back to our example, you wouldn't say 学生ですと. That sounds really weird if you want to say if you're a student. You would say 学生だと, right? That's fine, even if the end of the sentence is polite. So 学生だと, I don't know, 勉強しないといけません. That's a polite sentence, and still we need to use da instead of this because it's this clause in the middle of a sentence. It's not very common to use. It's basically never the case that you use this in the middle of a sentence there. So, 日本は早い難しいでしょう。早い fast. It gets fast quickly. So let's look at some examples for Nara. Okay. Here's one. I'm just gonna copy that over into my trusty text box over here. I'm just hoping that... Will that work? Oh, it'll be fine. Yeah, see, that works out. I'll just get rid of this one. So here we have アリさんが言うなら問題ないよ. You can sort of, if you want, you can try and guess what that means. I hope that maybe you're starting to see the pattern. Let's actually make our little trusty brackets again. アリさんが言う is our conditional phrase. It's the phrase that serves as the conditional, or as what I called assumed context earlier. So this is the hypothetical that we assume. If Alice says it, 問題ない. 問題ないよ. It's okay, it's not a problem. If Alex speaks, there won't be a problem. If Alice says that, then it's okay. Yeah, basically, there you go. Good job. アリさんが言うなら. If Alice says that, then it's not a problem. Now, again, this is an assumed context. This is like saying, assuming that Alice says so, there's no problem. But only if that's true, right? So, comparing this to maybe saying like, と. アリさんが言うと問題ない. That's a lot stronger. Saying like, アリさんが言うと問題ない is basically like putting your complete trust into Alice. It's like saying, if Alice says anything, that's always right. Something like that. It's a lot stronger. But here, アリさんが言うなら問題ないよ is a lot more natural in this case, sort of like saying, well, okay, if Alice really said that, then that's okay, right? And it's also sort of this assumed context that really matters with Nara, is that you're not sure if that's even true, but you're saying if it's true, then it will have some sort of consequence. You only use Nara on assumptions. For the most part, you're basically saying like, well, if that were to be true, then I would act in a certain way. That's most of the time how Nara would be used, yeah. You're not really using it for like matter-of-fact sort of natural consequence sentences like you would use to. Because they're just more natural to use to. If you want to be really strong, if you want to say like a natural consequence of something, then yeah. 似ている. Yeah, they are kind of similar, Japanese and Korean. So that's one example. アリさんが言うなら問題ないよ. Actually, we have a little example dialogue as well that we can look at. Again, I'm using like take him here for reference and also to find some sentences because it just makes my life a bit easier. So we're just gonna do that. We have this. And then we have this, which I think is kind of cute to have a little dialogue. So we have two people, Alice and Bob. アリス、図書館はどこですか? 図書館ならあそこです. So this is a pretty common structure that you'll see for using Nara as well, is answering these questions, because it gives sort of a little bit of a softer feel to it. It's not as rough. You know, Japanese is all about being indirect, I guess. 図書館はどこですか? Where is the library? And Bob answers, oh, well, if it's the library you're looking for, 図書館ならあそこです. 図書館なら. This is very common. You'll hear this all the time when people ask questions. People will say like, blah, 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 nara, because they don't want to be too direct. They're basically saying, oh, if it's that what you're looking for, then I have an answer. And even though that seems wordy, that's sort of the connotation, that's sort of the nuance that gets carried over with this sort of phrasing. It's like a rhetorical question, yeah, basically. Let me just get a sip of coffee real quick. Alright, so, nara, asoko desu. Like, if it's the library you're looking for, it's over there, right? So that's a pretty common example of nara as well. And don't even assume information directly spoken. Yeah, nothing is assumed, everything is permitted. Let's move on. Next conditional that we're going to talk about, which is going to be the one with アメリカ人ですか? はい、違う。ごめんなさい。違いますよ。アメリカ人じゃないんです。僕はスイス人です。I'm Swiss. The next conditional we're going to talk about is the ば conditional. ba. This is gonna have the most complicated conjugations. The ones before us were basically just, well, just use the verb in like plain form and you'll be fine, with some like added stuff as well. But this one here actually has conjugations. Ba is basically like a conjugation of a verb to get there. So let's actually look at the rules. So for verbs, right? Yeah, for verbs, if you had like... for verbs, basically what you need to do is you need to change it to... you need to change the sound to an e sound and then add ba. So for ichidan verbs... okay, here the conjugation is actually the same, but for ichidan verbs, you would go... Let me make this white. For ichidan verbs, you would have something like ru. Okay, all ichidan verbs end in ru, and you would basically just conjugate to reba, okay? Reba. And then for all the other ones, you would do a similar thing for all the godan verbs, where you just go from whatever sound you have like an u sound, you go to an e sound. Plus ba. Make that red maybe. Okay, so give some examples. You would have something like tsu for matsu. You would go to teba, okay? Because tsu is in the ta, chi, tsu, te, to column. So you move up from tsu to te. Okay, is that up or down? I, u, e, o. You move down, sorry. You move down to e. Okay, you move down to e and then you add ba. Like teba, mateba. So matsu becomes mateba. Mateba. Other example, we could have something like ku, okay? Now think for yourself real quick. What would ku be? Ku is kakikuke ko. So if we move down to e, that would be kakikuke plus ba. So keba, okay? Keba. I'll make it red again. Keba. That's the conjugation for verbs. For ba, okay? It's a bit more complicated, but it's yomeba. Good example, yomeba. It's a bit more complicated. It's not the end of the world. You're smart cookies, you'll get it, okay? You'll remember it. It's easy. Just tell yourself it's easy over and over again, and maybe eventually it'll be. No, it's actually really not that hard. Kuba, yeah, kuba. Sorry, keba. I misspelled it. So for those of you that spotted it, I wrote kuba. That's of course wrong. It should be keba, okay? So, yeah, good thing that Maya pointed it out. Of course, ku would move to... not ha, keba, like that. Thanks for pointing it out. There you go. We're all YDK here, exactly. We need to also look at another thing, is how do we use ba with e-adjectives and negative verbs, okay? E-adjective and negative verbs are often lumped together because they act a lot like each other. A negative verb is basically like an e-adjective in disguise. So how do e-adjectives and negative verbs work? Well, let's look at it. So we have e-adjectives. That's not how you spell adjective. You have e-adjectives and negative verbs. Now, e-adjectives and negative verbs have one thing in common, is that they all end in e, okay? That's basically the defining characteristic of an e-adjective, is that it ends in e. And the same goes for a negative verb as well, of course, because they all end in nai, okay? So here, all we have to do is move from e to kereba as well, again, okay? So, trying not to mess this up this time, kereba. I know this is kind of a lot of conjugation to absorb. This is also why I'll link you the article later on, so you can go over it again. This is sort of the stuff that you have to kind of get used to, you know. Is it because nai? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like e-adjectives and negative verbs in this case behave exactly the same way, because nai is also sort of an e-adjective, even though it's also not. It's weird. I can't help you with that, Sugo. 日本語勉強している。すごい。Alright, so, いければ. So you take any e-adjective or a negative verb and you just remove the e and you just replace it with kereba. Let me show you some examples. For example, what would happen to a typical e-adjective like oishii? Oishii. Well, it would simply turn into oishii without the e, so oishii. Kereba. Hey! Hey, say Jinx, thanks for the follow. Thanks for the sub. Sabu, ありがとうございます. ようこそ。よければ。おいしければ. What does that mean? If it's delicious, right? If it's delicious. おいしければ. Because remember, we're still, even though we're talking a lot about how to make these formations, we're still, at the end of the day, talking about conditionals. So we're still talking about if sentences. If it is delicious, おいしければ, right? If it is delicious, we could say, you know, 食べて or 食べた方がいい. I don't know. If it's delicious, you should eat it. It's better to eat it. Something like that, right? おいしい, おいしければ. Let's look at an example with a negative verb. Something like 読めない, which means cannot read, okay? And I'm purposely using like a negative potential here to show you that it kind of works with any negative verb, no matter what conjugation it is in. 読めない. 読めない means I cannot read it. Simply turns into 読めなければ. Okay? なければ. Just like the other one as well. ければ. 読めなければ. If you cannot read it, 読めなければそう言ってください. Or 読めなければ読んでください. If you cannot read it, please call. Please call for help. Something like that, right? Or tell me, you know? Something like that. 読めなければ. So there, very simple. Just replace the I with ければ. Okay, phew. We have one more thing to go through, and that is how to use it with nouns and na adjectives, okay? Last one, nouns and na adjectives. And then we're finally done learning how to use ba. It's a lot more work to learn how to use ba. Naraba, part of the lesson. Yes, we'll talk a little bit about naraba. With na adjectives, I thought we were going to take half an hour today, but I think today's topic may be more dense than I thought. There's just a lot to talk about. And, yeah, and nouns. This one is not all that bad. You just add de areba, okay? You just take, basically you just take the noun and you add de areba plus. And this goes back to de aru, which is a copula, which is like da, okay? So it's all connected. De areba. De areba. And na adjective is just the same story. Na adj. Why can I not spell adj? Just turns into na adjective plus de areba. There you go. That's not that difficult. Today's conditionals will are it. Na adjective plus de areba. Okay, so just that. Oops, I keep hitting that key accidentally. So that's really all it is. To give you some examples real quick, we can just say the same again. 学生 that we had earlier. 学生であれば. 学生であれば. That's it. Or na adjective, I don't know, 静かであれば. 静かであれば. If it is quiet, right? Alright. Phew. Right, wipe off the proverbial sweat from your forehead because we've done it. We've learned all the formations that ba can be used in. Again, I know that was a lot of information there. I'll link the article. You can read it again. Really, today, as long as you understand how, like, to, nara, ba, and tara are different, or like how they're used, that's good enough for now. You can always look up the formations later. Now, with this, we're gonna just look at some examples that I can just luckily grab from here, because it's much faster this way. So let me just do that. So we have a nice one here, which I don't want to write in red because it looks very aggressive. Right, here we go. Well, that's one. 友達に会えれば買い物に行きます。友達に会えれば買い物に行きます。Let's break it down again like we did before. Condition is this, 会えれば. And now it's kind of, it becomes a bit harder to split it up because the verb now is sort of conjugated into this ba. Conjugating de aru for nouns and na adjectives. Yes, you have to use de aru and conjugate it into de areba, basically. And remember, de aru is a lot like just saying da. 友達に会えれば買い物に行きます. So, if I can meet with my friends, 買い物に行きます. I'll go shopping. I'm gonna actually just kind of maybe do this, kind of like that, and then maybe say, well, the reba is sort of part of the particle or whatever, or maybe we'll just do this, okay? Now, even though ba is really integrated into conjugation of this verb, it's whatever, right? We'll figure it out. 買い物に行きます. So this is our condition, and this is our result. And you may be confused with this 会えれば. You're like, well, but you've told us that if you have a verb like 会う, right? He said that you need to change the u to an e and then add ba. But that would mean 会えば, right? 会えば. And the tricky part is, yeah, that's correct. A circle in Japanese usually means correct. That is correct. The problem is we're not dealing with 会う 会えば here. We're dealing with an extra step. We're dealing with the potential form. We're dealing with 会う turning into 会える and then 会えれば. Okay? We're dealing with that. That's what we're dealing with. It's an extra step of conjugation. 会えれば. And now it makes sense, right? る turns into れば. Now it's according to the rules. It would be 会えるなら and 会えると. Yeah. We're gonna talk about like that difference a little bit. 会えるなら. Yeah. 友達に会えれば if I can meet with my friends 買い物に行きます I will go shopping. How is the ba conditional different from the other two conditionals? So now that we've seen a result, now that we've looked at one example, let's actually talk about that. How is it different? We sort of always have to remind us what the others do so that we can understand how this one is different. The ba conditional, and the same goes for the normal use of the tara conditional, which we're going to look at in a second, are like the standard conditionals. A ba conditional is like very neutral. It just says, if that, then that. Okay? How does it compare to the to conditional? It compares to the to conditional in as follows. It's less strong. The to conditional, and that's the story for all of them when you compare them with to, is that it's always the strongest. To is always like natural consequence. Like if we replace to here, we would actually see 友達に会えると買い物に行きます. That would actually translate more to whenever I meet friends, whenever I can meet friends, I always go shopping. It's very strong. It's like a natural consequence. Comparing it to なら友達に会えるなら買い物に行きます. Here it's actually the opposite. It's a bit weaker. It's actually more saying like, well, assuming I can meet friends, then I will go shopping. But it's less certain that that's going to happen. Nara is again for like assumed contexts. You're just like saying, well, yeah, if that would happen, then, you know, then that could be a consequence. But it definitely makes it sound like you're not really expecting to meet friends. It would be 会えるなら. It's just the sentence ending form plus なら. 会えるなら. 会えるなら. And here with 友達に会えれば買い物に行きます, it's a little bit more the neutral one where it's just like, if I meet friends, we might go shopping. If I meet friends, we'll go shopping. If happens, then definitely will happen too is to. Yeah, for natural consequences, we would use to. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And now the real subtle differentiation is gonna come now when we're talking about tara, okay? So this is ba. Again, think of ba as sort of the neutral one. It's like it neither sort of makes it very unlikely, nor does it make it like very strong. It's just the neutral. It's like if-then in English. It's a very simple if-then kind of thing. And ba is mostly interesting as we compare it to tara, which is what we're going to do now. So let me do that real quick. Just pop that away. That's the last one that we're going to talk about is the tara conditional. So how does that one work? I'll make that red. Tara conditional. The tara conditional is at least easier to make, okay? All that you need to know about the tara conditional is that it basically just is done by attaching ra to the past tense. Okay, that's all it is. Best one of them all. I guess you're biased towards tara. The formation is done by just taking a past tense, past, and attaching ra, okay? Plus ra. Let me make an example for each one, okay? So we have verbs, right? Verbs have a past tense. we can say like something like, this goes for any verb, okay? It doesn't matter if it's ichidan or godan, you just need to know how to make the past tense. So we can just say like, tabeta, but it doesn't matter which verb. We all know all past tense verbs either end in ta or da, and then just we add ra. That's all we do, okay? Tabetara. Okay, another example would be yonda, which could be to call or to read. Yonda. And then we just do yondara. Okay, that's as easy as it is. Adjectives. Same story. What is the past tense of an E adjective is like oishikatta. So we just do that. Oishikatta. Oishikattara. Na adjectives. Well, what's the past tense of a na adjective? It's usually datta, right? So we would do like shizuka datta. Shizuka datta. And then we just add ra. And you see it's really not that hard. Same for nouns. Noun is the same story. We would just say noun datta, okay? I'm just gonna make it simple, just shorten it to noun. Noun datta. And then just add ra. Obviously, both na adjectives and nouns here rely on the copula, the past tense of the da copula, which I hope you know, which is just datta. So, gakusei dattara, okay, for example. Alright, and that's the formation. It's very simple, luckily. Compared to ba, this is much simpler. So that's how you form the tara conditional. You just take the past tense of any verb, of any part of speech you want, and then just do that, and just add ra to it, okay? Ra! Like a pirate. Alright, now let's look at some examples, okay? I am gonna grab this one, and you'll quickly see that tara and ba are very close, very similar, in fact. 暇だったら遊びに行くよ。暇だったら遊びに行くよ。If I'm free, I'll come hang out. 遊ぶ can mean to play, but it can also mean to hang out. 遊びに行くよ. If I'm free, I will come to hang out. Okay? Let's grab another example as well. Just put this here. 学生だったら学生割引で買えます。If you're a student, 学生 which means student, だったら if you are a student, 学生割引で買えます. You can buy it at a student discount. Okay, feels like subjunctive. Well, does it? I don't know. For simplicity and everything, I'm gonna use brackets again to show the sentences. So we have condition, let's say condition here, and result. 遊びに行くよ result. Condition, result. Here again. 学生だったら condition, result. 学生割引で買えますよ。買えます。You can buy it at a discount, a student discount. 学生割引, which is a student discount. Now, let's actually look at how tara and ba are different, okay? They are very subtly different, okay? The main difference between using tara and ba in sentences like these is that ba tends to put a little bit more, ba tends to put a little bit more focus on the condition, and tara tends to put a little bit more focus on the result, and that's basically it. It's not a huge difference. For example, this is like an example that is used here. Let's take a look, right? We're just gonna take, basically say the same sentence twice, okay? So we're gonna look at this sentence. 友達に会えたら, again, 会えた, past tense of 会える, can meet, versus 友達に会えれば. 会えれば. 友達に会えれば買い物に行きます. These sentences look really, really similar, and truth be told, they are, okay? There's not like a world's difference between those sentences, but it's just the nature of language that sometimes things are just like subtly different, okay? So tara, really speculative? No, not really. It's just that, let me quickly do this first. 会えたら 買い物に行きます。And then this one here is like 友達に会えれば買い物に行きます。So that's kind of the difference. 友達に会えたら買い物に行きます。So if I can meet with my friends, I'll go shopping. And here the emphasis is on the result. It's like, oh yeah, then I'll go shopping. If that happens, then we're definitely going to go shopping. It's the important part. Whereas saying 友達に会えれば買い物に行きます is more like saying, if I can fulfill this condition, then we'll go shopping. It's like, if I could meet with my friends, then we'll go shopping. Maybe it could be done in English with sentence order. You could say like the first one, 友達に会えたら買い物に行きます. It's like, oh, we're gonna go shopping if I can meet with my friends. Or 友達に会えれば買い物に行きます. Well, if I can meet with my friends, then we'll go shopping. It's subtle, okay? It's a subtle difference. I'm gonna be honest with you. This difference doesn't really make a world's difference in like natural conversation, like when you hear it. It's not that different. You'll just kind of subtly get used to it. We had an example earlier with like friends, with money, right? お金があれば, which is like, well, if I had money, 何かを買うかもしれない. If I had money, I might buy something. お金があったら何かを買うかもしれない. Well, if I had some money, I might actually buy something. Subtle. And what if if I want a past tense verb as the condition? So let's talk about that as well. A past tense verb, you can use the tara conditional as sort of a past tense conditional. But let's talk about what that means, all right? That's like the other usage of the tara conditional, which is very interesting. Okay, so that's why I'm going to mention it now. And that's sort of the last thing, actually, that needs to be mentioned in this case. So how does it sort of manifest itself in a like past tense kind of sentence? So here's a good example. Using tara as a past tense conditional actually gives it the nuance of an unexpected result. Okay? 家に帰ったら誰もいなかった. So here we clearly have a past tense sentence. 家に帰ったら as I came home 誰もいなかった. And that's kind of how you use like the past tense conditional. You can use it for unexpected results. When you did something and the result that you got was kind of unexpected, tara is very commonly used. So here's one example. As I got home, no one was there. You kind of expected there to be someone at your house. Maybe you live with your family or whatever. But when you got home, there was no one there. Okay, so that's a very common use of tara as well. Is this sort of, back when this happened, then something unexpected was sort of the result of it. From the ending of the result. Yeah, and like the result is then also put into the past, obviously. Because you're referring to a result that already happened, basically. It's already done. There's also like some edge cases where it's like, well, if I would have met my friends, we would have gone shopping. But then I think you can also just put the result in past tense, and most of the time it should convey just fine. 友達に会えたら買い物に行ったはずなんだけど, that would probably work. If I met my friends, we would have gone shopping, but something happened. And I think that would work just fine. Because Japanese doesn't have these like super, like these encapsulated past tenses like English does with I did or I had done. There's not like a past perfect or whatever in Japanese. Two conditionals. Give me an example, then I can help you. What if they're different? What if they're different renes? I don't know. I don't know what that means. All right, so, and of course we have to mention some edge cases as well. Where is it? Right, because Hotame also brought it up. What is the nuance of, there is actually taraba, okay? Taraba. Now, taraba, okay, is just tara, but it's more formal, okay? That's all it is. It's tara that's basically the way you look at it. Taraba is just tara, but it's more formal. It's kind of like written language. Taraba. Tara is just taraba. It's basically the same. What's the other one? Naraba, okay. Naraba is just Nara, but more formal. Naraba. Naraba is basically just Nara. There's really not a difference. Not really. I've heard Naraba though. Yeah, Naraba is really just that, but it's more formal. So yeah, I don't think I've ever seen her taraba. Yeah, taraba is also not that thing. What if the conditional and the result are different tenses? If I'd saved him, he would be alive now. もし助かったら今生きているはず。今生きている。I would just I don't see an issue there. I think English is just so complicated that we think it's complicated, but I would just phrase that like that. あの時助かったら、あの時なんか救えたら or 救えたら if I was able to save him that time 今生きていると思う。今は生きているはずだ。Something like that. I don't think it's that. I would just phrase it like that. Honestly, I don't think. Yeah, Naraba sounds more strong than Nara to me. What do you think? I think it sounds more formal, to be honest. Naraba. It's like, yeah. So Tara works for that. Okay, I think it does. Yeah, I don't see why not. Don't see a reason why it wouldn't. Okay, and then one last thing. Okay, last thing that we're gonna talk about is Moshi. How does Moshi fit into this? Wow, thanks, Spike. Real cool. Cool, I appreciate that. Thank you. Can you be a little bit louder, actually, so that the viewers can appreciate you more? Thanks. Okay, so how does Moshi fit into this? Moshi is really just like an emphasis kind of thing. Like you add it at the start of the phrase, but it doesn't really change the meaning that much. It just makes it a little bit even more... It's like a little bit of like wondering. It's like, well, by chance, you know? Let me just give you an example sentence, and then things should be somewhat clear, I think. もしよかったら. You'll often see it with... Hey, Glendale, thanks for the resub. 6 months! That's like half an eternity. Thank you so much. Colt's Park example. We'll check that out after I talk about Moshi. I must have missed it. So, Moshi is just adding a little bit more strength to this like conditional part. So, もしよかったら. If by chance it's okay with you, right? If by chance that's alright. 映画を見に行きますか? Can we go see a movie? Should we go see a movie? So that's really all that Moshi does, is like adding a little bit more like, oh, well, if by chance it's okay, that kind of nuance. Doesn't really change the meaning all that much, okay? It's just like an extra word. And the same goes for other conditionals like Nara, okay? So this would be an example using Nara here. Plop. Just plop that in. There. もし時間がないなら明日でもいいよ. If by chance you don't have time today, we can do it tomorrow. That's all right? We can just do it tomorrow. That's it. Moshi. That's how Moshi fits into all of this, basically. All right, and that's basically it. Let's look at Colt's park example that I didn't see. If you're home early and the sun is still up, you can go and play at the park. Oh, how would you say that? 早く帰ってまだ夜じゃなければ. Something like that. You probably just... The thing is, usually the way you do it is just you have the conditional clause plus the resulting clause. But the conditional clause could theoretically be elongated to be multiple clauses, I think. So, 早く、その、日が沈む前に早く帰ってきた場合. I don't know. There is like probably multiple ways of phrasing that. Well, not a conditional, but other usage of tara you mentioned. Can toki also be used sometimes as a conditional, or is it misunderstanding things? It depends. Let me think about that. Not really, because toki is usually used for mentioning things that really happened in the past, not things that are hypothetically happening. Could you use a relative clause? Maybe. It's getting complicated now. もしかしたら. I think it's almost best if we just like try and like put out our feelers, you know, like the little feely things, and just look out in the coming week when we play games for some conditional phrases, because it's always an issue of like, can you do that? Can you do that? Can you do that? And like usually the answer is yeah, somehow one way or the other it does work. It's probably easiest if we just kind of pay attention over the next week or so whenever we play games and like, oh look, here's a conditional phrase. How did they use it? What's the nuance? What's the implication? So I'm going to try and do that as we like, you know, progress through and do our thing as we always do. For if it can to be summoned, maybe. Yeah, because we're getting more into translation now, where you're like, oh, I have this thing I want to say, but how would I express it in Japanese? And things get complicated, where it's like more of a matter of like, can you versus should you? because you say all these like hypothetical sentences, and it's like, yeah, you could phrase it like this and like that. But then we're getting like in a territory where I'm like, I am tentatively saying, let's just look at real world examples and try and figure it out. All right. So that's it. That's the conditionals. Now you tell me how you thought I did. My goal for this lesson was, like I mentioned at the start, to be more focused, not get as much distractions by the chat, and I hope I accomplished that somewhat. And yeah, there you go. 家に早い帰るなら still haven't really. So 早く家に帰ったら would work. 早く家に帰ったら if you get home early, something like that. You would have to use an adverb there. Anyways, thank you so much for watching Japanese 101. Stick around, the stream is going to continue very much. Yeah, but the lesson is over for now. We're doing this every week. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I don't know what we're gonna do next week, but that's part of the excitement, so stick around.